Good morning, welcome. My name's Pete. For those of you that are just joining in, today we're going to be discussing the Ten Commandments. So we'll jump right into it. We'll start off at Matthew 22, starting at around verse 34. Now, most people have heard of the Ten Commandments and they're familiar with them. Can't everybody quote them. It's a lot to quote as far as the actual 10. And it can be overwhelming if you try to think about it and meditate on it and try to break it down into commandment versus commandment. So what we're going to do is we're not going to go to the actual 10 commandments back in the Old Testament. For those of you that believe in Jesus, the Son of God, and his teachings, and have the faith of it, we're going to go to Jesus' teachings. And if you're not a believer, that's okay. You can come and check this out and just take it for what it is and just listen to what Jesus has to say about the Ten Commandments. He's going to break it down for us and simplify it so that it's easier for us to, it's easier for me to comprehend and understand and practice it in my daily life. And it has worked for me, is working. I'm obviously not perfect, but we're going to go ahead and get into what Jesus had to say about it. So we're going to start at Matthew 22, verse 34. But when the Pharisees had heard that he had put the Sadducees to silence, I hope I'm saying that word right, they were gathered together. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him, and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? He's referring back to the Ten Commandments. At verse 37, Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. Now, if you go back and read the Ten Commandments, that's actually the first commandment. So now we go down to verse 39. And the second is like unto it, meaning it's like it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. What does that mean? Well, he's basically saying that if you can practice these two, nobody's perfect, but if you can practice it, and as with practice you get better and more apt to doing it on a daily and hourly, maybe even minute throughout your day. The idea is to try to put God first in everything that you do. And if you put God first in everything that you do, at least practice it, you are more likely to love thy neighbor as thyself. Now, if you go to the Ten Commandments, back in Leviticus, I think it is, you'll read that the last commandment is thou shalt not covet. Covet means to desire something. Mostly, I think, if you look the word covet up, it's an unhealthy desire. But I don't think in every application it can be unhealthy. I think it just depends on what you're coveting and the reason behind the covetousness. So this is what Matthew is quoting Jesus is saying. Now we're going to go to Mark 12 And let's look what Mark has to say about it, because this conversation is reported by Mark also. And I like to add that, when you read the gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you'll notice in a lot of cases the wording is a little bit of a different view. But you can tell that they were there, but they have a different take on what was said or what was done. Sometimes it's just could be a minute, variation. And as that is with most witnesses, if something happens and you go talking to different people, depending on where they were at or what they were looking at or, what they were focusing on, will depend on what they say as far as the witness that they give in the testimony. But that doesn't necessarily mean that one of them is lying. It just means that there's a little bit of a different view, a little bit of a different take, a little bit of a different focus. If two people witness a crime, somebody might see something that the other one didn't see. Somebody might hear something that the other one didn't hear. And you kind of got to put them both together and you see the picture. But I like to think that when you find something in Scripture, especially in the Gospel, where it's almost word for word, you might want to pay attention to that, because that is simple. There's not a lot of meditating on this and trying to figure out what's actually being said. So we'll go to Mark 12, starting at verse 28. And this is Mark's version of the same conversation. And one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, and perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, which is the first commandment of all? And Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. The second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than this. So what he's telling you is that if you put God first, try to treat people like you want to be treated, like you would like to be treated. That's kind of the foundation, not the foundation, we'll say the blueprint of trying to be godly, trying to walk the walk of righteousness. Obviously, none of us are 100% righteous. We all trip, and we all fall, and we all slip and backslide from time to time. We all go back on stuff that we say we're not going to do, and sometimes we don't, but then other things we do. It just depends on the person. I slip on stuff all the time, and it doesn't mean that I'm not trying to adhere or practice these two principles, but this is what I try to practice for me, and it works. I try to keep God first with what I'm doing. I try to, there's a lot to be said about that phrase, what would Jesus do? And if you keep that in mind, it kind of makes it easier to think about these and to keep them on the front burner of your day and your thoughts. You just put him first. And if you're doing that, then you will inadvertently start treating people like you want to be treated. Now, and a lot of times when you're first starting this philosophy and mindset, it can be taxing sometimes. It was for me anyway. You see people and it's like, why? What, but you try it, and for me, it works. And it still does work, and it worked. Am I perfect at it? No. You know, I can be short with people and be fed up, or even just not in the mood and just kind of blow something off. And then looking back on it, it's like, man, I had an opportunity to walk the walk, and I blew it. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I, I blow it a lot. Uh, but I like to think also that I do complete it. Um, you know, it's a struggle, depending on how you look at it. Maybe the struggle is the wrong word, but it can be a struggle, especially in the beginning. And the more you try to practice it, the easier it becomes. And the more you practice it, you see the fruit of it. Sometimes it's an instant fruit. You can, you know, just it really is. Now, sometimes you might not ever see the fruit of it. Sometimes you might just think that, well, I went out of my way, or to, you know, to treat somebody nice, or to do something good, and you know, to put God's principle first. You know, and to try to be, you know, uh, represent Him. And you might not even see the fruit of it. You might get what looks like a bad a bad attitude, or they just are ungrateful or unthankful, or but you don't really never know. You just might not see it at first, you know, but when you practice it, make no mistake, a seed is planted, um, and you never know what they think 5 minutes later. They might realize I've done it. So I'll speak on myself. I've had people treat me as they would themselves, if they would like to. And maybe at that time, you don't, I didn't appreciate it. Or I just was so nonchalant or casual about it, as if, yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. You know, went through the motion of speaking something that obviously I was supposed to say or brought up to say. You know, always say thank you. And maybe you didn't even, or maybe I didn't even say thank you. So, but then you never know a few moments later what goes through that person's mind and heart. Um, so don't get discouraged every time it doesn't seem like you got an immediate fruit from your labor. It's just not always how it works. But the idea is to just be consistent with it, and it gets easier. And for me, the way it's easier for me is because I try to put myself, I try to look at myself, and I know that I'm not perfect, and I know that I'm not always outwardly thankful, or maybe I am in my own mind, but maybe I don't put off thankfulness to the person who went out of their way to do something for me. You know, I had a situation with somebody in my life where they had done something for me. They had sent me some money, is what it was. And I didn't, we spoke, and as far as my memory was concerned, I was thankful. But this person is close to me, so it's a little bit more than just casual. And the conversation come up as to whether or not I was thankful about it. Maybe I don't really, I didn't think a whole lot about it. And maybe that was where I came off unthankful. So you just never know really where you're at. But like I said, I went back on it and thought about it, and maybe I was. And that's kind of what you got to do with you want to look at yourself. And when you think about yourself, you can kind of understand better, maybe, with what somebody else might be thinking. Because we all go through the same type of thoughts. We all help people and then think, well, that person didn't seem very thankful. And then somebody might help me, and then I might say, well, they didn't seem very thankful. But the point is you really never know what type of seeds you planted. So you want to try to keep him first. See, if you keep him first, what would Jesus do? You're going to follow God, because that's what Jesus did. He followed God to a T. So if you're doing that, and you're trying to put brotherly love and treat people the way you want to be treated, that's the best way to be. It really is. And it's not always easy. But when you practice these two, the thing about the 10 Commandments is if you practice putting God first, which is the first commandment, and then loving thy neighbor is for a better explanation, is the 10th commandment. Or actually all the other 9 wrapped in one. The 10th commandment is thou shalt not covet. But if you practice these two, you won't covet, you won't kill, you won't lie, you won't cheat, you won't steal, you'll honor your parents, your mother and your father. You won't be worshiping other stuff. They just all fall in line. And when I say worshiping other stuff, there's just different things that you can worship. A lot of people think, well, I'm not worshiping anything other than God. Well, we're all guilty of worshiping stuff other than God. Just because you're worshiping something other than God, it doesn't mean you're on your knees, in a circle of candles praying to something. Okay? It's not anything you put before God is a form of worship. Anything you're focusing on other than God is a form of worship. You say, well, how can that be? Well, if you're focusing on God, you're worshiping God. To worship means to give attention to in a holy, spiritual way. Well, if you're giving your attention more to something else, then you're worshiping it. Like I said, it's not like you have to be on your knees praying to it. You don't have to. Just the fact that you're giving it the attention is a form of worship. Now, I'm not saying you got to walk around and you can't think about anything other than God, although it works for me to try to keep practicing that. Gives me peace, and he likes it. And the more he likes it, the more he rewards you. But yeah, so put God first. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And your neighbor is anybody. It's anybody on this planet. It doesn't necessarily have to be the person next door to you at your house or anything like that. It's anybody on this planet. And it doesn't mean go around and just be unwise with how you do things. It just means be conscious, be aware, and if the opportunity presents itself, the more you practice it, it's like anything, the more you'll consciously do it. So I hope this helped with the 10 Commandments. Remember, put God first, treat people the way you want to be treated. Y'all have a good day. Thanks for watching.